A good morning, a warm welcome to you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Ashraf Garda, and this is the Ashraf Garda Show. So from 8 to 10 a.m., as we've been doing all throughout the month of Ramadan, I'll be hosting the show, and I hope that you are really enjoying the type of content that we're delivering for you. As always, your feedback is very welcome, and WhatsApp, text or voice notes are like first prize for me, or you can also post on social media. In terms of WhatsApp, it's 061-766-0355, and then otherwise on the various Salam Media platforms. You can also call in live 010-880 2396. We've got a really hectic show as we did yesterday coming up. I'm going to chat to Professor Somadoda Fikeni first up. And here's the question. Think about this 1 year, right? Is a new world order unfolding? Prof Fikeni believes so. So we're going to get the big picture into what he's talking about. We'll also get an update on what's happening in KZN. Now it's been declared a national disaster area provincially. That is, what are the implications of that? And lots more questions around just the state of Ekurhuleni, rather of Tegwini, as well as the whole Durban region, with more flooding expected or more rains expected by the weekend. We'll chat to Sanzaf, Yasmina Frankie, about what's the who, what, when, where, why around what Sanzaf does, and looking forward to that particular conversation. But there's another important issue regarding the election runoff in France, and both candidates are pushing an Islamophobic line. Why? Because they believe that's the best way to win support. It's a rather ironic thing, don't you think? We'll certainly talk about that. We'll also have the how-to in Ramadan in terms of how to make the most out of your Ramadan, and we have a fascinating guest to talk about how she champions South Africa. All of that coming up. Don't forget, we'll have the feature about another one of the historical mosques in South Africa. That comes up later. The show itself, as always, is brought to you by Africa Muslims Agency. Imagine a world where every family has food for suhoor and iftar in Ramadan. Something very topical right now concerning what's happening in KZN, right? So call the African Muslims Agency on 010-0722-262.
Giving a meal for suhoor or iftar. Africa. This Ramadan, join Africa Muslims Agency to provide meals to the fasting for 100 Rand a day, a food hamper for 1,500 Rand, or feed a village for 15,000 Rand per day. Imagine if you could earn Allah's forgiveness in these 10 days through your acts of charity. Donate today. Call AMA on 011-834-8685 or donate online. Africa Muslims Agency, commemorating 35 years of empowering, educating, inspiring.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
The global wheat market is in turmoil and prices have risen rapidly. This places the most vulnerable Syrians at greater risk of hunger and food insecurity. Sponsor a ton of flour at just 7,500 Rand and help ensure displaced Syrian families get their daily bread. Donate flour for Syria online at alimdad.com or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
World-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic, Sharia, and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings from short-term to life and investments. A full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider.
Zakah has the power to end extreme poverty. If the whole world gave zakah, it could end extreme poverty many times over. Islamic Relief has been distributing zakah for over 38 years. Our zakah policy complies with strict Sharia guidelines. It's endorsed by qualified scholars, and it only goes to eligible rights holders. So, harness the power of your zakah with Islamic relief.
Are you looking for a cross-border road transport company that is committed in achieving high safety standards, who is fast and efficient, and also excel in customer service? Garda Global specializes in cross-border transport from South Africa to Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi. Garda Global, situated at 10 Daniel Road, Benrose, Johannesburg. For inquiries, contact our trained staff on 011 614 3108 or email info@gardaglobal.co.za. Safe, long haul into Africa is our business. Garda Global Transport.
It's been a household name for years. It's been an important ingredient in South African kitchens, and it's been an affordable, healthy choice for your family. Helios. First our pure sunflower cooking oil, and now introducing Helios margarines and spreads. Following the same traditions and tastes you've grown to love and trust from Helios. Fortified with vitamins A, D, and E, also rich in omega-3 and 6 essential fatty acids for a healthy eating lifestyle. Helios margarine and spreads, available now at all leading South African supermarkets. Helios margarine, the tradition lives on.
Mornings with Ashraf Garda. Connect on Twitter at Ashraf Garda. This is the Ashraf Garda Show, live and exclusive on Salam Media and One Nation FM.
Just two other things to just acknowledge up front. Professor Chilizi Marawala, the Vice Chancellor at UJ, University of Joburg, winning the IT Personality of the Year Award from IT Web. And that's for his work really around IT and 4IR, which is very much a champion of. And then Fatima Hassan from the Justice Project doing sterling work around highlighting the issues of what I call vaccine apartheid. Well, she's won a global award called a Cagliari Award and an endorsement as well from the WHO's DG for her fantastic work. And both of them are made in South Africa. And that's a tribute again to the type of people that we have in our country. If only now we can collaborate and co-create, we'll have a far better country that we live in. We'll talk about KZN later on. It's that area now been declared a provincial disaster area. What are the implications of all of that? But let's talk about a global issue, because it concerns every one of us, the issue of an unfolding new world order. Well, certainly Professor Somadoda Fikeni believes that there is an unfolding new world order. That's rather scary to me. What does that really mean, right? He is the chairperson of the Indlulamithi South Africa Assay Scenarios Trust 2030. So we thought let's pick his brain, and that's what we're going to talk about as part of our big picture for the first 20 minutes or so of the show, understanding this developing new world order. Prof Fikeni, appreciate your time and thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you very much, and greetings to your listeners, and also happy Ramadan to all those, going through that particular important moment.
Absolutely. What fast number 12 out of 30, and I think post Ramadan, you and I need to have that cup of coffee. Long delayed, so that will happen soon, right? Thank you.
Yes.
Let's talk about. Interesting. You talk about a new epoch, a new world order unfolding. Tell me more.
Well, if you look and you're a student of political history throughout time, you'll know that when you have major disasters, decline of certain powers, and major shifts, whether industrial revolution or a major war or pandemics, they tend to converge, and thereafter you'll have a new world order. And in the aftermath of the Second World War, it was inevitable that you would have a new world order, new institutions, Bretton Woods institutions, human rights commissions, the charters for the world, and the Cold War on top of that. You do have major powers that emerge to lead that particular space and try to exploit it. Right now, you have had the 2008 financial crisis, which was the first shock. You have had pandemics but they were quite limited as epidemics in Asia in this part and that part. Then now COVID-19 came as a major shock in our living memory. And it has shifted a number of things. You saw vaccine nationalism, economic nationalism, the reassertion of statehood during that period. But it did something else. It forced us into the space of the fourth industrial revolution that we had been talking about, which means technologies became major role players. As you see the virtual work, the conferencing, the virtual lectures, and so forth. So the world is being redefined. Then the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has huge implications. Remember, this is not Syria, this is not Afghanistan or Iraq. This is a country which still has the largest arsenal of nuclear weapons, but at the same time, a country that has massive reserves in terms of the gas, oil, and highly sophisticated technologies, by the way, biological weapons as well, just like the US and so forth. So this is going to shake the world so fundamentally. Of course, climate change is one of the massive issues that are coming in more frequently. You see the storms in the US, across Europe, you see fires in Australia, and here at home, you have seen drought, and now you see floods. Not just in the regular El Nino, El Nina situation, but you do see the change of seasons. Those will force certain changes. The expansion of the desert means migration as people are pushed off, and you'll see more wars internally and between countries, as you see in Eritrea, Ethiopia, and so forth. So all those are in the making, the rise of China, and probably the split of Russia drifting towards China and several other countries. And you can imagine if the West could not contain North Korea, the scale now of this superpower. And you're beginning to see the failings of the globalization system as it stands, because it has led to more inequality, it has led to more poverty. It is simply not sustainable. No less of billionaires who benefited from this, like George Soros and Warren Buffett, who are saying this is not sustainable. So the new world order is unfolding. The key question is, do we have leadership, which we saw in Potsdam post-Second World War, defining it? Or is it going to be fragmented plurality where things just drift in different ways?
Well, I think it's important points you raise, and that last question is particularly telling. So, in terms of your understanding, just to understand the status quo now, if a new world order is emerging, in a simple one-liner, how would you define the current world order? What is the current status quo of the world?
The current status quo of the world is the US leading the West, dominating the world, but in a state of decline. Whilst China is rising and bringing in countries like Russia around itself, and also bringing in some of the BRICS members and smaller states to say the conditions imposed by the West, I will not impose them, but you'll still have access to certain things. And that is now expressing itself around technology wars, around, even the issues of, geopolitical contestation of terrains. It is expressing itself around even the notion of whether the world should have dollar as its denomination. There are many things which are taking place. It's the West in decline, but having to fight for that space and try to consolidate, and the ascendance of China, and that is the status quo. Even climate change is going to be contested around the same. The issue of just transition is going to be contested around the same. The issue of intellectual property, security around technologies is going to be fought around the same.
Well, so well, therefore, the point that you made earlier on, would this new world order be defined? And you mentioned some of the elements, but would it ultimately, ultimately people would drive it? Would it be defined in a fragmented way, or would it be a global cohesive definition? What do you think is going to map out?
Because you have a crisis of leadership at this moment and countries absorbed by their own internal challenges. You look at France, which is undergoing elections right now. You look at USA, which could get Donald Trump, and you see the country fragmented. So you will see plurality, which is fragmented because you have virtual crisis and absence of leadership to define that new world order. Unlike the times of Tony Blair with all his weaknesses, where he could define the third way, unlike the times of other leaders in different epochs, which could begin to say, let's imagine and reimagine a new future. What are the rules? What are the institutions? Right now, even the notion of multilaterality is being challenged. The notion of the role of the United Nations and the calls for its reform, it's intensifying. So it will be a fragmented plurality. For one reason, the West is not going to leave its hegemonic dominance lying down. They'll fight everywhere in every space because they do not understand or accept the implication of what, after 500 years of dominance, a new world order without them at the center would be.
And I suppose it's a difficult question to answer, but it has to be asked: will that new world order? Well, two things. How long does it take before we see this new world order clearly defined? In years or in decades. And the second part is: would that be a new world order for the better, for good?
Well, it is like your body. When you say, will you be healthy next year? Will you have firmed up? It's the role players taking agency to make it good. In the absence of such role players, it will be bad. Therefore, this is the space where leaders, thought leaders, role players, private sector, civil society, and so forth should begin to act locally but think globally. Because the vacuum that we see in the political leadership as it used to be, who are heading the states, means that you need people from across the world joining arms to say, this is what we would want to see. For example, trade laws, the fair trade, what would that be? Just transition, but still going towards the direction of saving the climate. What would that be? Because if you leave it to smoke-filled boardrooms where the most powerful sit, they'll always work for that 1% that is increasingly become richer. They'll always work for their own interests. So you might have a situation where people's power, in a sense, away from just the state, transnationally, might help shape this new world order. But
carry on. Sorry, go ahead.
But if they are not stepping to the fore, then the new world order will be the one of volatility, complexity, and unpredictability with greater pain of fragmentation and geopolitical contestations.
Yeah, and there's so much to consider on that. It does get me thinking about the role of the United Nations. Then, what are all the countries and the peoples of the world, as you've mentioned, but the United Nations, where would they fit in, or where do they sit regarding the established order and the new world order?
The United Nations is as strong as the commitment of countries who are its members, especially those which are regional powers and global powers. Once they tend to absorb themselves into their national interest, into their self-interest and selfish interest at times, then United Nations is a lot more weaker. But United Nations, as it is currently configured, has been tested to the limit by a number of things: the Israeli-Palestinian situation, the Yemeni situation, the situation now in Ukraine means that at times United Nations become so weak and helpless. You need a reform of United Nations. We can't do without United Nations. Even if it didn't exist, we would have to create one. But at the same time, the issue is, how do you capacitate United Nations? How do you come up with norm innovation to say what is good and what is common good for humanity? It used to be bound by what is good for the states. And those, by extension, was the leaders of those states agreeing on what is good. How now do you bring in the civil society element, the transnational organizations, even to the space of the United Nations to say...
And currently they're not there, right? Yeah. The civil society element is not there. Yeah.
No, they're not there.
In terms of reform, I mean, therefore, would you say, I mean, I get what you're saying. There are issues that are being presented and voted upon every single day, but countries inevitably vote on their alliances and what they perceive is right for them. And I mean, we've seen the Russia-Ukraine one play out, and you mentioned the Israel-Palestinian issue. I suppose part of that reform would be re-looking at the power of the veto with regard to the permanent members of the United Nations, isn't it?
In fact, that is most fundamental because it simply reflects the post-1945 victors' self-award. And that in itself needs a review because power since 1945 has shifted fundamentally. And yet these archaic powers of veto are left with those who happen to have been victorious at that time. It is for that reason then that there is a need for reform. I know that the call for reform has been coming, but because those who benefit, who are at the top, were not feeling the pinch, reforms were not as important. But right now, one of their superpowers who have veto powers is the one they are trying to tackle. They can't. Just like US would let people debate for 2 days over Israel and Palestinian issue, only to raise its hand and say this is not going to happen. So you're beginning to see the filibustering and you're beginning to see the paralyzation of the United Nations, even on issues of simple common values. So that in itself means that system needs to change, but that alone should not be the only focus. Look at the Internet of Things. What are the laws governing the Internet? Mass media, digital communication. You can see how the crisis in Ukraine is so graphically, exposed, wall-to-wall coverage, which is humanizing their experience and pain. But have we seen the same in Yemen? Have we seen the same in Afghanistan? Have we seen the same in Eritrea? Have we seen the same in Gaza? Have we seen the same elsewhere? Which means this war has exposed global racism, in essence.
So what you're saying, suffering is equal, but the amplification of the suffering is not equal, purely on the basis of access to technology by certain countries or certain regions of the world. That's why we know more about the suffering of the Ukrainians and less about the suffering of, say, the Yemenis.
It's not even the access to technology, because we pretty much have the access to technologies, but who dominates those platforms? And what is the framing of the argument there? Because how the discourse itself is shaped is such that if at this moment you were to say, but what about the other suffering, you could be declared mentally ill in some spaces. And yet scientifically, it's a valid question to ask, because others have even suffered more by this time over a prolonged period, but we do not know their names. We do not know their schools. No one show their toys lying around with blood splattered. They are non-human. And it is for that reason that you are beginning to see fundamentalism and some of the extremist movements saying this globalization has defined us outside. Now they are trying to reassert their identity, because if the membership to globalization is to westernize, they say no. So these are some of the things which are coming up, which need to be addressed quite urgently, even outside the UN per se.
Okay, two things before I let you go, Prof Fikeni. One is we spoke about the United Nations and civil society, and yes, maybe a way to integrate civil society movements within the UN. Is there a scope for a united civil society or civil society movements outside even of the United Nations? I mean, if you ask me, who, is there a movement like that that we can sign up to? I'd have difficulty telling you.
Well, it is not easy to find one because of the fragmentation and the state-centeredness of the global system. But with the Internet of Things, increasingly you're beginning to see some movements or organizations in different forms, which may evolve to be bigger than what they are. Take the Gift of the Givers, take Red Cross, take Human Rights Watch, take several other entities that are transnational in their footprint, and they are beginning to express some of the ideals that people and humanity in distress are looking for, which governments are not providing. Those, if given space, they could become platforms through which broader transnational solidarities of human beings and the redefinition of certain rules could be defined.
The other part, and we'll end with this, what is the solution to inequality in South Africa, in your home country, and around the world?
Well, I do think that for me, the solution to inequality is just to make sure that you change the structural arrangement that reproduce that inequality. Where you balance capitalism, which is the best in creating wealth, but very poor in the redistribution, with other value systems where those who invest have a fair value of what they get, but it is ridiculous at times for a CEO of a company to earn in 1 month what several employees cannot earn even if they were to live for 300 years. It just doesn't make sense. There's so much you can buy with money, but there are certain levels which are obscene. So that in itself, to me, is to find something that is neither capitalism as we know it now, nor communism as it struggled to exist then, but that has humanizing element and structurally compensate for those who may fall below the net. But that also must deal with issues of just transition as climate change is taking place.
Absolutely.
How do you create funds that will help those in distress to relocate and so forth, rather than just leave them and pay the nominal fee to a certain government and you dump them, you go make your profits elsewhere?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, as we end it, thank you for your time. It's a good point about just amplifying that last bit. How do you, balance out inequality? You restructure the causes of inequality in the first place. Well, I'll tell you what, it's been a fascinating conversation talking to you. So much that has come out of it, and I certainly appreciate it. And I certainly hope from the listeners and viewers of Salam Media, they would certainly make notes and see how they can then implement that in their own lives, in their own communities, because ultimately this new world order may well be defined by what happens at community level. Prof Somadoda Fikeni, appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.
Here we are. So much to talk about, so much to emerge from that conversation with Professor Somadoda Fikeni. He is the chairperson of the Indlulamithi South Africa 2030 Scenarios Trust. Now, did he get you thinking about the big picture into this new unfolding world order with all the different elements that come into it? It certainly got me thinking. And if you have an opinion on that, as I'm sure you would, feel free at any time to comment on our social media pages, but also you can WhatsApp, voice note us, or WhatsApp, text us anytime that you feel that you have a view. And in fact, I certainly want to encourage that. Right, we're going to talk about what's going on in KZN, because again, there the issue of climate change perhaps impacting dramatically, drastically, but also the level of deprivation, the level of suffering is not equal as expected in an unequal world. We'll talk about that in a moment.